The Women of Black Girl podcast invite men to join our conversation, inspired by Nipsey's incredible life and untimely passing. Ebro Darden, Dawan Alford, and Justin Carter share their insights on PTSD, trauma, mental health, ego, and more. This is BGP Marathon.
What were the emotions running through you when you first heard the news of Nipsey passing?
I was with my daughter. If I remember, wasn't it a Sunday? Mm-hmm. It was a Sunday. I was confused. And then I was, angry. And then I was you want to place blame, you want to find out what happened or who would do something like this. And then you go into the conspiracy theory mode about, who was paid to do this and why did they do this? And then you're confused again and you're angry. I think the hardest thing was, because I'm on the radio every day, I don't recall thinking it was about specifically the Dr. Sebi documentary. I remember feeling that it was more about him being the figure that he is in that community and being a landowner in a community that is being gentrified right now. And I was encouraged to keep my mouth shut, so I did. Because, it's normally I don't listen to that advice, but because Nipsey is who he is and not say he's gonna bring him back, I kind of held on to those emotions. I still have a lot of things that I want to say about it that I just haven't got into yet. But yeah, it was all of that.
It was just sadness, because I understood. I'm a big fan of Nip, and like Ebro said, the first thing I thought was conspiracy theorists, right? Knowing he was working on that documentary with CB, I remember hearing them say in the interview, if they get me, y'all better ride for me or something along that nature. And it was just sad because, like the good ones, it's like Kodak need to catch one, Trump needs to catch one. Like, I don't mean to say it like that, but the lame-os don't go, The real ones always seem to go, And it just kind of makes me really sad to see the real good ones, that have immense impact, get the short end.
I'll say when my boyfriend is a huge Nipsey fan, and I was the one to deliver the news to him, and I maybe should have done it a bit kinder. Or, not that I was aggressive, but maybe a bit more cognizant of like how attached he was to Nipsey as a fan. And we were on the couch and I popped up and my heart was racing and I was like, babe, something happened to Nipsey. And he dropped everything he was doing. And my immediate concern was, how is he doing? How is he coping with the emotions running through him? How is he going to deal with grief? How is he going to deal with disappointment? Like, as a man, how is he going to just deal with all of this running through him?
The only thing, I think I feel the same sentiment as everybody else. But what puzzled me the most, which I was trying to process as far as grieving for someone you've never met. I think a lot of the times, like, I sat there and I was like, I feel so strong about this. And I don't know this man. I've listened to this man's music. I've listened to his message. I resonate with his message and everything. But why does it hurt so bad? Like, I was literally grieving for someone I don't know. So that's something I had to process. And I think learning, saying that we see him in so many Black men I admire. You know what I'm saying? I see that in Ebro. I see that in my little brother. I see that in, my uncles and other friends that I know. You know what I'm saying? So to see him gone is like seeing somebody I know pass, and you're just like, why? He was doing the right thing. He was doing what he was supposed to do. That's what I thought. That's what you were supposed to, your purpose on this earth was supposed, to be. And then to get ripped from that, or maybe I understand now, maybe he's done his job. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he's completed what he had been sent here to do, but it's just hard to cope with any grieving, I think. Dealing with people who passed away. So that was it. I think that's the only thing that was puzzling for me. I'd never met this man. I never did.
You have met that man, like you said.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think we've all met that man.
Right.
Who had, you know, plans and dreams and.
Right.
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 That hurts.
I mean, I know both of us were in LA at that time, and I remember wanting to leave, like, and not feeling like it was dangerous, but feeling like this sadness that is in this city right now is going to be so much worse in 24 hours. Like, this is going to be the beginning of a real, like, journey for LA, and then for the rest of us as a culture. And I remember feeling like, why Nipsey, like everyone else? Why this man who was actually, like, in the interview saying, you know, at the end of the day, I just want to inspire people, and then was actually inspiring people? Like, why this person? And I'm hoping that we can actually learn from him now that people actually see him, because I think a lot of people didn't appreciate him while he was here and was, like, you know, an underdog. A lot of people didn't know about a lot of the things that Nipsey did until we started to be like, he was giving back to his community, and he started a WeWork type of office space, and he did this, and he had 100 millions of investments everywhere else. So I think he represents like that cousin, that person that you always wanted to do better, and then they did better, and then that was that. And that's just the sadness I think that a lot of us feel. That was a good point.
I think he said it in his music too, though. Like, he said he represents hope where the hopeless is at. You know what I mean? And like, if any time in your life you felt hopeless, you know, especially like as a black man who listened to him like for 10 plus years, I guess he's been around or whatnot, it's, he always like, he was kind of like that hood preacher, like, but a rapper. You know what I mean? He knew how to talk up and down enough where everyone could receive the message, you know, and through his interviews, his raps, he always stayed consistent. And like, you know, his messaging was like, keep going, run the marathon continues. And like, if, you know, you doubt yourself, just keep going. And like, he kept it real. And he said like, he kept winning because he kept going. And even when he hit road bumps, like when he caught a case, like he just kept going. And, you know, just, when we saw him going, like in the fashion that how he was murdered, you know what I mean? It was in cold blood in front of that store where he had so much struggle, so much progress, and in the fashion that it happened, like how dude did it, you know, it just spoke volumes about like, you know, where we're at as a whole like community and a culture, you know what I mean? It's like we always kill our own, you know what I mean? And he was a good one, we lost one.
We're not raised in society, specifically American society, I don't, you know, really know much about anything else, to be able to be mature with how we deal with our emotions the same way women are. You guys talk, you have platforms for that, you're encouraged to do that. That's a part of the programming. So in this scenario where we heard that, you know, Nipsey told this, I don't know the other guy, I forgot the other guy's name, Eric Holder, not to come around because he was a snitch. You know, in his mind, that was his, he had to respond in some way. He had to do something because he couldn't cope with that emotion in that moment. You know what I'm saying? And we're probably gonna learn something about him, and I hope everybody's prepared to receive that and not just be like, nah, he need to die, because in a lot of things that we're learning about, and I don't wanna go on any tangents, but we're learning about black men dealing with their trauma or the way they were damaged, right? Like Leaving Neverland, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's damage didn't start with Michael Jackson. R. Kelly's damage didn't start with R. Kelly. This Eric Holder kid's damage didn't start with him. You know what I'm saying? It started elsewhere. So I think it's lazy to just go, you know, put this dude under the jail, right? Because I think we might learn about some mental health issues that he's got and, you know, other things. And not everybody's gonna be sympathetic to that, right? Not everybody's willing to be, you know, open to like, this person has a mental health disorder, or this person, you know, had some levels of trauma that caused a mental health disorder, and here's what they were. And then just LA, like a lot of people don't even understand Los Angeles gang dynamics, right? And how these gangs even started in the first place, which was, you know, joblessness and black men initially trying to organize and be leaders in their community. And it became corrupted by, you know, once again, emotional mismanagement, somebody starting an immaturity, somebody starting an issue with somebody across town over something. Now they gotta die because they disrespected my manhood. Now I gotta show them that I'm a man by doing X, Y, Z, and that spiraled into this and sets and so on and so forth. And I don't, I'm not a professional, but when it comes to dealing with these things, but we got a lot of work to do if we really want to try to understand men, and then specifically black men, because there's other layers that black men are dealing with, right? You don't know how many times I'm having a conversation with mothers about how they're managing holding their young boys accountable for their actions. Something that simple where you're looking at a 4, 5, 6-year-old behaving a certain way and parents are making excuses. And that becomes other things later on. Or, who's checking on the boy in high school who asked the girl to his dance the first time. And he got laughed at by all the other girls. Right. Because his clothes wasn't right and his shoes wasn't right. So then to get his clothes and shoes right, what's he gonna do? Mom and dad ain't got it, mom ain't got it. Dad doesn't, maybe not in the home to teach him how to deal with it. So he goes out and figures out how to get fresh. That going out getting fresh leads to
more problems.
Boom, boom, boom.
I kind of want you to talk to that point, because I feel like that is like the core of what you advocate for. Like starting where all of the pain and healing needs to happen. I think you should really talk about that.
Right. So you kind of spoke about grief management, right? Mm-hmm. And you kind of talk about conflict resolution skills, right? All these very basic emotional skills that we essentially don't have the safe spaces to cultivate, right? If you think about this correlation with PTSD with black men in inner cities, I like to take it a little step further, because this conversation around post, we have this correlation with people who may be in the service, right? You said you served, so when this idea of this correlation, post insinuates that you've been removed from that space, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. And the symptomology is connecting to your past. Mm. But ain't shit post about this. It's every day. It's the constant, continual management of continual trauma. Mm-hmm. Or if not being traumatized, the possibility of being re-victimized. We end up, and when the deep thing about trauma is, it transfigures your DNA. Once you experience it, and it's not optional, right? It's not like if a loud boom was to happen right now, without any thought, every last one of us physiologically would trigger. We would shift. Before our brains even went through it. That's a physiological response to your environment, right? So without any thoughts, our bodies are hardwired to train itself to prepare for survival. That's what we talk about, that fight or flight instinct, right? Everybody kind of knows that. But, in the brain, we have this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which literally secretes certain endorphins, right, in our bodies that make it impossible for us to have the ability to use decision-making skills in real time, right? So it's eliminating our abilities. But we don't even factor in the physiological limitations. We just go right to, you're not emotionally equipped, right? But in reality, it's some physical things that we don't necessarily learn how to process, right? And when we talk about dealing with grief, how do niggas know how to do? Black men know how to do it, right? How do we do it? We hit the block, we roll up, we smoke, we pour out, right? We put a mural up for our homies with t-shirt, headbands. And we have this infatuation with death. We can see it all around from here to LA, the only way, the limited scope of management is about, if there's a spectrum, we got about this much that we get to explore, right? We get to get a t-shirt, we get to some tattoos. I got my best friend face tattooed on that's the best way I could go through my pain at the time. I needed to feel pain. I needed his face tattooed on me so I could look at him every day and go through that in a way where I had no therapy until the first time I went to therapy, and I sat down in front of some Asian and said, yo, this is what I'm going through. all my homies is going through it. She looked at me like, none of this is okay. And for the first time, I was like, so you're telling me that how we do it is not okay? She like, none of this is okay. And for the first time, I felt like a weight come off me, like, oh, okay, so I got more work to do. And I went on this journey to like really kind of do this inner work, which I found was more dirty than any work I ever did.
Yeah.
It was that real dirty work, like, oh, I needed to break down some things that I had in me that I never even thought that I needed to process. And that's when I think the work started.
That wasn't scary for you?
It's hell.
So you gotta reintroduce yourself to yourself.
I had to, here's the thing, we got some triggers that we don't know about, right? They're unconscious. And until we try to figure out what's triggering those things, we're just gonna keep responding to it in ways that's not helpful, right? Or really kind of moving us forward. So we gotta kind of do that work and trying to like unpack some of those things that's like triggering us in ways that we don't even know.
Right. Do you feel like that redefined your idea of manhood, learning that the way you're coping with it isn't normal, or learning that dealing and facing emotional pain or dealing with emotional mismanagement is the right path into manhood? Does it not affect your manhood at all?
I mean, for me, it didn't affect my manhood at all. My manhood, most of my life has been defined, unfortunately, by my ability to protect myself and my loved ones, and how much I can provide for them. That's kind of my zone. Every man, that's been my zone. Can I protect my loved ones and provide them with things that, either matter to them, keep them safe, and help them thrive?
Justin, how do you define manhood?
Oh, that's a doozy. It's so layered. I mean, like you said, like being able to provide and take care. I don't have a family besides like my parents, and my nieces and whatnot. But for me, it's just like being able to provide for yourself and like your loved ones and take care of things, and emotionally be able to, not overreact, if that makes sense. Like given like the situation where Eric
be logical.
Yeah, like he
which
definitely
is a trick bag, boy.
He definitely he didn't master his emotions, or like, and not even say master, but he didn't have control of his emotions. Like if you read back like the whole, transcript or whatnot, like Nip said whatever he said to him. He tried to diffuse the situation. They said he saw like in his eyes that he looked bad, like he looked like, and he tried to like, bring him like, hey, just bring your paperwork and we'll talk. Dude went to go get a burger, came back outside, walked around the corner, came back and killed him in cold blood. Like that dude was a murderer who couldn't control like, the envy or the jealousy that he saw from Nip, or just Nip just telling him something that he didn't want to hear. And in that instant, he instantaneously like sent a shockwave. I mean, honestly, through the world. You know what I'm saying? And he probably didn't understand that or know that at the moment because his emotions, clouded his judgment. But just being able to control yourself, and whatnot.
I think gang culture, when you live in spaces where your life is possibly in danger, you have to define ways to exist for yourself that's based on survival, right? So a lot of my manhood and many of my counterparts, your manhood is based on your ability to survive. That's literally what it comes down to, right? But you learn really quickly as you become a man, as you have a daughter or a child or a son. I have a daughter. My survival skills are now limiting my ability to be a dad in a lot of ways where, I've got to relearn what it means to be a man, right? And that's where that unpacking comes in, because like Ebro said, surviving, providing, but that's a small part of the spectrum where emotional vulnerability might contribute greatly to your ability to parent, right? But those are things that, in a lot of ways, we don't tap into.
You know what? I think I do want to revisit that because I didn't think you opened some doors. Like, I fought in a war. Like, Afghanistan. I was there for 9 months. I wasn't like supply. I was a combat medic, and I was in the front lines. And like,
so you've seen it all.
I've seen so
right.
much. So like,
been to therapy?
Straight out. When I got back, I was like, yo, something ain't right.
Right, and I was in therapy for like 2 straight years before I got out. And when I got home, I continued and all that. But, you know, that survival instinct is incredibly hard to turn off. And actually, in my opinion, you can't turn it off. You just scale it back. And like, you know, there are instances where I do go in survival mode, like even like, you know, everyday life. Say if your bank account gets too low, you're like, I gotta do something. And you know what I'm saying? I gotta figure this out. And like you hoping like, you know, you can figure it out before you really get into survival mode. It's a different, you know, there's different types of survival modes. You know, growing up black, as a black man where I'm from, like it's big black population, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, grew up in the streets, you know what I'm saying? So when I went to like the Navy, it was like, oh, okay, I'm in the Navy and be in the boat. Nah, wrong, you're gonna be with the Marines. I was like, oh, you know, and then like going to Afghanistan and having to survive to come home. And then like when I got home,
Still gotta do it there.
yo, I still had to deal with like craziness when I got home. And
Where's home?
Coatesville, Pennsylvania. You know, I had PTSD before I went, and I didn't know.
Right.
And like I'm 32. My dad was on crack for 34 years, so he's smoking crack before I was born. You know what I'm saying? So had that dynamic in my household. You know what I'm saying? So like when I got home, he owed people money, and like I'm literally just getting home from leave, right? Like from the base there, and like I'm paying people off. Like you talking about like people I grew up with, you know what I'm saying? And like I think by that happened though, it helped me in a way like to learn what I should and shouldn't be doing. Cause I was living in Virginia and I came home to Pennsylvania, and I don't know if you know about Virginia, it's the Wild Wild West out there. And I had a pistol, and like I drove everywhere with my pistol on my lap, like wild stuff. And like, if you, like Bex knows me, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you probably would never guess I'm that dude running rock, you know, driving around like this. But I came home and it was just like, sheesh. And I was like, yo, I got something up here, like the triggering with like, you know, my past and like the present and then my, you know, all this. And I was like, I gotta get help. And if I keep going like this, it's gonna explode and I'm gonna do something crazy.
Very brave of you and very proud of you for going to therapy. It's very easy for black men to, or I don't want to say just black men, just the black community to shun therapy. And there's nothing wrong with you. Drink some water, throw some holy water on it.
Pray on it.
Right, or pray on it.
Pray it out.
And the fact that you
Sometimes
did
you
not
need to
do that and you knew is exactly why we should have this conversation and why we're actually having the conversation, to just let people know that that's okay to feel as if something is off and go seek help for that, to avoid situations as Nipsey.
Was it mental for you or physical when you realized something was off? Did you notice it before you came home and like?
I mean, over there, you don't like, you kind of like, be frank with you guys, like gunshots are like, it goes from like, oh, to like, all right, everybody be quiet, which direction you're coming from, you know what I'm saying? And then it's like, all right, let's call artillery, let's go over there, like, you know, let's take care of this. To, like, I've never been like the big bang, like the boom, like, you know, scares me anymore type thing. But I really don't like big spaces with a lot of people. Like, I've shot Afro-punk, like, photo-wise, but like, I always end up leaving early every day. I don't like huge crowds anymore. It's just way too many possibilities, like, in my head. Like, I don't mind flying, but, you know, it's not my favorite anymore, but it's things like that.
It's insane.
I kind of wanted to switch gears and ask about thoughts about brotherhood, friendship, and like how that has influenced you to be the type of men that you are today. Because that takes a lot of factors into the things that we do. We spoke about relationships. We spoke about how a lot of crimes are, you know, labeled after passion because of the connection. So like, how has your relationships with other men led you to be who you are?
Me and my dad was a very like emotive, you know, I love you, son, tell me you love me, hugs, like all of that. So I never really, so I know some men have that problem of expressing love for their brother or their, you know, community person or anyone. I've never really had that problem. But I think also, you know, being around a a hyper-masculine, probably in many ways, toxic male also at the same time, right? Because he abused my mother and was hustling and pimping and doing these other things. You know, it helped teach me kind of how many different layers there are in a particular human being, that you can completely dislike one attribute of a human being and also, you know, love them and commend them for a whole other attribute, you know, and how it's very complicated and nuanced. And if you're doing your job reflecting on it and accepting it, right? Because I know a lot of individuals have trouble accepting the reality of who their parents are, or the reality of what their family is about, or the reality of what their culture is about. If you're prepared to do that, you can do the work of like making sure the cycle stops. But it's heavy lifting, you know, but acceptance is key. Because it wasn't, you inherited it. You know what I mean? And I know sometimes it's embarrassing, and you know, the brother talking about his father being a crackhead and him having to go, imagine what that does for your, you know, ego when you have to go pay the debts of your crackhead father to your friends.
Right.
Right? Like that takes a certain type of stand-up, secure individual. And you know, and you can't be afraid of the circumstances that you've inherited. And I think in this conversation, we've inherited circumstances as Black people in America, a country that was founded on violence, right? And most of our ancestors were brought into that violence, or in some cases, opted to come to America for a better life. But that better life was tied to a bank account. We always got to remember that. Everybody, I came to America for a better life. That wasn't spiritually better. That wasn't culturally better. That was about a bank account. And so the reap what you sow kind of thing, you came here for material gains. You came here to play this game, this American game, and we're in it now, you know? Some of us, you know, inherited it, and it was forced upon our ancestors. Other family members might have decided that that was the best path, right? But acceptance is key, you know?
I lost a few people the last few years to gun violence. Just to share a few stats, homicide is the leading cause of death, African-American men ages 16 to 24, right? Number one. So when we think about the residual impact of that, right? So we know that Black men are dying from gun violence or homicide, mostly gun violence. There's this kind of like a ripple effect where it touches everybody, right? Not just the immediate family, but the homies next to them, the block over, the kids at the school. You know, I found myself really looking for new friendships and men, because for me personally, I struggle with that. You know, I didn't have loving men around me growing up. I never been embraced much by men, so it was ultimately something that I'm working on today. Right, I got this hashtag on my IG I keep doing called "Show More Affection."
I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, because I went to India, and when I went to India, I kept seeing all these boys holding hands, and I was confused because I thought they was like, you know, there's no way it's this many gay people in India. But that's just what they do.
But that's what you would think.
That's what I thought.
Right.
And when I went to Ghana, I saw it again. I saw men holding hands, and so I started to question it. And this is just how you know guys are good friends, right? And I was just kind of like instantly challenged myself like, oh, I got work to do. I got more and more work to do. So I'm now challenging my homies to try. I'm like, yo, my homies just getting on me. They're like, yo, I'm not holding your hand in public. I'm like, could we at least like hook pinkies maybe? Or like, they're not feeling me.
That's even worse.
Right.
We're not hooking pinkies, my G. I'm ready to do work, but we not hooking
Just
pinkies.
stand right next to me and act like we hold hands.
Put your arm around my shoulder. Put your my shoulder, my dude. Like, that's clean.
But even that was happening
know
the
what I
whole
mean?
conversation.
Exactly.
That's how y'all like showing
The
yourselves in
reaction
different
of it
conversations.
is why the conversation is important.
No, it's great,
Yeah.
but I'm just here to let you know we not hooking up. Not a circumstance.
I'm getting a lot of pushback, a whole bunch of pushback. But the point I'm trying to make is that culturally here, black men, you know, we define masculinity as our ability to be stern and be on our own and be tough. And it's so interesting because it's like, how much emotion can you not show, right? What's your ability to not show it? So the more I mastered that. I'm A+. I'm A+ and not showing it. I can sit here stoic as whatever we're going through. But ask me to go through the multitude of that emotional space. I gotta push myself to be vulnerable. And I'm just really challenging myself every day to be more and more, right? But then my man started, he hit me like, this not true. Because every time we see each other, sometime we shake. This is funny too, black brothers, we could kind of talk about those instantaneous kind of decisions around how we embrace, right? Because it happens really, really subtly, right? Where you can feel it in a handshake, whether or not it's gonna stay there or you're gonna pull somebody in. And in those moments, right, you can kind of feel it like, this my guy, and then it's like, you ain't even holding my hand, it's an embrace, it's a hug, right? So a lot of times in the hood, when you really love them, you hug each other, right? And so it's there. I'm not saying it's not there because we embrace each other, but that's the max. That's as far as we go.
I mean, I got some friends, and we don't stop hitting hands and hugging. Like, we don't say goodbye like 6 times. We just keep hugging. You want to hug one more time? I got friends like that.
And I think that's healthy because we don't do that as men enough. You know what I mean? And I just think the more that we can keep pushing the limit, I'm gonna keep pushing the limit. My homies, I ain't had a handheld yet. But it's something I'm thinking about now.
Some of these things we're talking about are not just black male issues. It's American.
This is a Western American.
These are
that we've assimilated to.
These are cultural things that, there's things that we've adapted to because of how we've been brutalized, but there's also just the nature of this country that's 250 years old, whatever it is. That's based on violence, based on taking, based on stepping on someone else. That's what capitalism is. Like there's a loser. Right. There's a loser. That's what this is about. And I think, while we try to become better human beings, once again, accepting what's happening out there and understanding what's happening out there, maybe accept is the wrong word, but understanding, acknowledging what's out there and what's shaping our behavior that's beyond just what we're able to control in our communities and our families, right? Because, being in denial about it, I think sometimes is as dangerous.
Yeah, brotherhood, man, this is very interesting. So I just told you about my father, but me and my father, best friends. This dude, I love him. I love my dad to death.
That's beautiful.
It took all my life. I mean, he's been around. He always lived with us. You know what I'm saying? But he'd be out 2, 3 in the morning, and I'd stay they didn't know I was up until my dad got home. You know what I'm saying? So it was very clear. It was very clear. You could see where I was in elementary school, everything was straight, and then when he really started going in his bag, it would be poof. And I kind of was F school, but anyway, but he taught me how to be a man and not be like him, and something just clicked. Was you don't want to be not like him, but you don't want to take that path. Yeah, and I've been always good at that, and growing up I had friends, man, but one thing I always refused to do was to be boxed in with my friendships, and they had started a group, kind of I don't want to call it a gang, because they wasn't in the streets. You know what I'm saying? I was doing whatever I was doing, and they was on the sidelines. But
y'all had fingers y'all was throwing up. Y'all had signs.
They had a little shake.
They had to have a shake. They had to have it. A little throwing it down.
But
we get it.
After that point, I started hanging with my family. My last name is Carter, but it's supposed to be Trowery. I didn't know this until 9th grade. So it was like a whole bunch of dynamics going on. So I started hanging with my actual family, like my cousin. And me and him are still cool to this day like this. But like traveling like in the Navy, like going from like Japan, coming back to Virginia, North Carolina, going to Afghanistan. It's like I have so many brothers in this world that like I don't speak to a lot like anymore. Like, but when I see them, it's like since 2006, you're like, "What's up, brother? How you doing?" "Oh yeah, still hanging out." Like it never like
Leaves.
like it never left each other, man. But also too, it's like, you know, I guess to say it as how can I say it, man? The negative part about, you know, my wartime was like I did have to turn off my emotions for the good of myself to survive that deployment. I'd probably say like the last 4 years, like I've been like just trying to live like with love, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like, yo, what's up, my dude? Yo, I see, how you doing, man? Love you. Like, I make it a real good point, like, to my best friend, like, Avery, be like, yo, what's going on? Like, yeah, I'm coming down. All right, love you, bro. Like, love you too. And like, we make it a point to say it to each other now. Like, before I just didn't do it. Like, we were just like peace.
It's hard. It was hard to say. It's I mean, being a black woman, it's hard for me to say. And I think that's just how I was raised. I had a random transparent, I told you about this moment with my mom when she was talking about the person I used to date and asking me why we weren't together, et cetera, et cetera. And we had some type of a conversation regarding not being able to express saying I love you to her husband or even her children, but that doesn't mean that I don't love you. And I wanted to keep the conversation light, but I was like, it's not necessarily okay. So I'm trying to find a space where I can say I love you to my friends or my family or the person that I'm dating or whatever the case may be. So I think it's just the way we're raised.
I think
situational.
Bringing it back to Nip.
Yes.
Imagine if he had all the love, if he knew that he had all that love out here. Like, what would his impact have been?
I think the piece of it is if you understand LA gang life and you understand what he was trying to do with regard to not only economics, right, which is something that even outside of LA gang, but he was working with individuals that traditionally you wasn't supposed to be working with.
Even in the moment of his death, the guy that was arrested shortly after he was shot as well, he had just came out of jail. And Nipsey was giving him clothes. He was helping him to recover from, you know, just coming out of jail. So that speaks to something too, because it's like right in the middle of his death was an act of kindness.
Right.
But that's that social capital that we don't necessarily quantify, right? In all of our work, I'm sure that each of us has kind of figured out a way to pull somebody up a little bit. And in some way or another, I feel like we need to figure out ways to start to acknowledge each other for that kind of work.
Yes.
Because that's the kind of stuff that's not going to make the paper, it's not going to necessarily go on our resumes, but it's important. It's important for us as a culture to start to recognize, like, you know, we're working together to really trying to advance inequalities, inequities, right? Because those kind of things matter. And I think, you know, I saw this post that kind of talked about Nipsey's overall impact and kind of touched on like economics, but it also like, here's all the people he gave jobs to, here's the 50,000 people and I'm just like, you know, why aren't we quantifying that, right? And I wish that in some way or another we could start to praise each other more, you know, love on each other more for that kind of work that I know all of us are doing. And I just think it's so important to do, and I wish that he could have knew. You know, like, yo, like I wish he could have saw that. You know, like.
I mean, this is the, I would say, you know, in '86 through like, I would say like 90, 91, maybe even a little earlier, like 85, in the music, Public Enemy, X-Clan, BDP, right? You had brothers really talking and trying to teach and share information, right? It was common. And then when it became about record sales of the 90s, some of that stuff went away because it became about what can I do to get the most money, right? And so people just started making music that was the most popular, right? And doing things that were the most popular. Part of our community's affliction with capitalism is just a part of the American construct. And a part of the gang culture also, part of that culture is making money, right? There's money, you know, and who controls the flow of money in these neighborhoods, you know what I'm saying? And so what you're asking for, I agree with, but it also gets to a conversation about where the jobs at, right? Where the opportunities at. And, you know, the reason I keep bringing up the American construct is because I think that we are, unlike other communities, we don't have the ability to access capital and funnel it into our communities the way other communities do, which creates, now factor in the fragile male ego and men feeling like the ability to provide is what their masculinity is tied to, and I can't provide and you can, and you're my next door neighbor. My lady might be looking at you a certain way because you taking care of your lady and your lady bragging about the vacations and shit you going on, and I ain't really, you know what I mean? And dudes start thinking about that sort of thing, and that manifests itself into something else and something, you know what I mean? And so on and so forth, and everybody's taking a deep breath, but that's how long that list is.
Layers.
I have a question about, so I think Meek and a lot of people, a lot of rappers have talked about how they feel like they're gonna die in their communities. Like I said, I feel like I'm gonna die in Philly, but I'm comfortable going back there. Like that's where I belong, that's what I know. There's this feeling, especially as Black people, of going back and putting the people on in our communities and helping them to learn basically what Nipsey did, helping them to learn it and go forward. Now, how do you guys feel with that experience? Like knowing that you may be harmed here, but you know you have to do good here, do work here, because if you won't, then no one will. What is that like feeling like? I know you guys both are.
I mean, personally, it's like, you know, I think I just dealt with death enough right now. It's like, I don't fear death. Like, it's just like wherever it's a continuation of where, you know, my spirit goes somewhere else. Like, it's up for debate where we going, but, you know, you know, I'm gonna go somewhere else. So you can't be, I'm not fearful anywhere, like, especially like Black communities. Like, I live in Brownsville right now, you know what I'm saying? Like, when I first moved to New York, I lived in East New York, you know what I'm saying? So like, I never was fearful going home. At any time, at any point, any place I went here, like, or anywhere in that, you know, we are Black at the end of the day. And it's like, you know, if you want to do the work, you got to know what comes, like, what's the consequences that can come with it. Nip knew, you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe he didn't know in that moment that it would happen then, because you never can predict the future. But, like, you know, it's just like, it's kind of like it is what it is thing in the back of your head, personally for me. And after that, you know, let's get it rolling, let's get it cracking.
I'm not that comfortable. I'm not that comfortable. I had the opportunity to travel a bit, you know, and abroad. Sometimes I was with groups of people from educational spaces, right? I'm the Black guy of the group. I got an Asian girl, a little white boy, and I'm just like, you know, we navigating through urban spaces abroad. You instantly know, like, there are some skill sets I've cultivated navigating these urban spaces that have equipped me to kind of pay attention to these, you know, these things, the way they haggle you in the market. You know, it's Canal Street. Yeah, you look at them the right, you know, and they back up off you, right? But at the same time, I learned really quickly that I was always really overstimulated navigating in these urban spaces. And I'm not okay with dying. I'm not okay with just, oh, it's gonna happen. So my radar is lit. I'm hardwired. I'm paying attention to the way things are moving around me at all times. Maybe it is a response to my trauma, right? My mother and my father both suffer with drug addiction as well in my community, right? And there's times where I'm walking through my hood and I see my dad riding a bike with some metal on the back. You know what I mean? That's my dude. I love him. Yeah. You know what I mean? But he just, you know, we know him in my hood. And everybody do, right? And I look just like him. So when they see me, they know who he is. They know who I am. But I say that to say, navigating in these spaces has charged me to really try to shift that narrative, because we're adequately so taught to make it out, right? Because these are stressors, right? Things that we essentially have to, that change the way we operate, right? If you walk in, you hear a loud noise, whatever it is, right? Those are things that change the way we are operating. I don't want to die, so I'm constantly factoring in the possibility of potential threats. And not that deep, but it is though, you know? And that's why when I talk about, there's nothing posts about this trauma, you know, we hear gunshots regularly in some neighborhoods, right? And it don't get easier for some of us, right? It doesn't relax for me.
Yeah. But you still do the work and you still show up because you want to change the narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still showing up every day to do that, but you know, I'm trying to shift that narrative away from let's make it out to let's fix it, let's build it up, let's get the guns off the street, let's help the community, let's help our blocks.
Does that affect how you trust Black people in the Black community? Does that, because when something like this happens, you know, a lot of the times, especially the person I am, who I'm speaking about Black people all the time, empowering, wanting Black people to come together and everything, and something like this happens to Nipsey Hussle, and you're like, it only took one person. When like Meek says things like that, and Nipsey has once said that, I sometimes think, okay, yeah, I would want to trust my people enough to know that I'm safe around you. Right. I'm safe around my Black people. Now, yes, it'll take one to take me down, I get that. But sometimes I often think, is that why Black people run away from certain communities as soon as they get on? Is that why they walk away? Is that why they turn their back? And you have to go back. Like, in order to affect change and actually change these people in these communities, don't you have to go back? I understand throwing money, charities here and there, and doing all those things, and you know, giving boxes of sneakers to kids. I get that, but what else are you doing? You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I get what you're saying, but I am totally comfortable. I think if I speak on as many death threats as I get, I think I'm totally okay with going the way that I go, as long as I've helped people way more than I've hurt. You know what I'm saying? So I think a lot of the times and on top of that, I'm sorry, one more thing, and then because I know everybody was talking, we showed Nipsey a lot of love, I think, from the people that he wanted to get the love from. Mm-hmm. I think he got that, he received that. I'm sure we could have gave him more. There's no such thing as too much love. Mm-hmm. But Toni Morrison once said, the function of freedom is freeing others and freeing someone else. And that's what he's done in his life. Yeah. And I think a lot of the times, as long as you have committed yourself to freeing somebody else, not looking for your own freedom, because that is freedom. Mm-hmm. Allowing somebody, giving the tools to somebody else. And I said this on State of the Culture, where I was like, as long as you give somebody else the tools to free themselves, you are doing so much work, because they will know that they have to give somebody else those same tools to get out of whatever circumstance they are in. So I think he's done the work and he's done the job.
I think in his death, he reached the people that he couldn't reach. You know what I'm saying? Right. And like, he touched us, the people that he didn't, was intending to touch while he was here on earth. But like, in his death, he's definitely touching people that, who didn't give him an eye or didn't like look his way or listen to him. Now they are. So.
And yes, you're right, and I understand where you're coming from as well, because I immediately had a whole bunch of regret and a little bit of even shame for not even noticing that, because he was loud in his community. And the fact that I missed that loudness hurt me to the point where I was like, what the fuck were you doing that you missed this? How did you miss this? And I spoke about it on the last episode, that on the Elevate episode, that I met him at ComplexCon, and I wish I would have known everything that I know about him now. Then my approach with him would have been completely different. And not saying that I judged because he was a rapper or whatever the case may be, because I did see a little bit of leadership and was poised in him in just that small moment that I shared with him. You guys weren't there, but I briefly spoke about how I felt like he came with 50 people to this small activation, which is not even the size of this room, and everybody was protecting him. And he had to, as like a captain leader, say, stand down pretty much when they were talking to me. And immediately, like soldiers do, literally everyone came at ease. And I was like, oh, he's a little different than every other person that I've met in a space like such that I've had to interact with. And that was just my brief moment with him. And I didn't realize how much greatness was just in that moment until after I lost him. And that made me so upset that I wasn't able to have any of that and experience it with everyone else that was privy to it before me. So I understand what you're saying by, I wish he would have seen that. Because I do sometimes question, like, did he really see that? Like, did he know that when his time would come, that he would be at the Staples Center? Like, I know he thought big, but did he think that big?
He may not have.
And I really wish that he would have been able to see that, because that was beautiful.
He may not have known Staples Center
Right.
and all the details
Right.
that we're now seeing. But I
Right.
think he lived a life very much so that was set to provide for his family. Even when you think about how Reggie Bush started the GoFundMe.
Right.
And I think that was purely out of ignorance on his behalf and not knowing the type of person. And I don't mean that with any malicious intent, but Nipsey set, like, the funeral also spoke magnitudes of, I can't even get the words together. Like, the funeral was needed in my eyes for our culture because it touched many different lights that we struggle with. Spirituality,
Yes.
our own self-identity, family relationships, love relationships, his relationship with Lauren London,
His children.
his relationship with Black Sam, his relationship with his children. Like, it showed the many sides of what
Pan-Africanism.
his Pan-Africanism.
African spirituality.
African
yeah.
spirituality.
But
That just shows how
That shows-
no one person is one-dimensional.
Exactly.
And we
Right.
let this rapper term
Yes.
Yes.
define just one. We have one definition for a rapper.
What a rapper
right?
is.
They have no idea, or outside, I think even outside of the culture, they have no idea what a rapper could actually mean.
Right.
And to redefine that, that's what Nipsey
Nipsey
did. That's
did.
what a lot of us, a lot of rappers have done. But I think Nipsey has really taken that word and said, look how many ways I can flip this.
Right. He
Look
lived
how-
very intentionally. Because he lived so intentionally and he lived with purpose, everything is set. So of course, like, he did know his time was coming.
Yeah.
He may not have thought it was gonna come at 33, but he lived in a way that it was like, I'm not living here to think I'm gonna be here forever.
I think everyone, when everyone says I don't think Nips knew how much he was loved, I really did think because he was very centered.
Yeah.
And he knew himself very well in and out in order to be able to be consistent like that in character, in integrity, in action, and just showing up for people in his life. So I don't really think that, like, he didn't know. Like, how could you not if you first are at peace with yourself?
Everyone knows we're gonna die.
Everyone. And I think he really understood that, like,
that
yeah,
very
not
clear.
like my time is coming because I'm in the hood. My time is coming because everybody's time comes.
Right.
So I think he really understood that and was like, because I'm on borrowed time, I'm going to make sure I show up for me, for people, for whatever, because that's all it is impacting time.
Yes.
So it doesn't, when people say, I wish he did. He did. He was so profound of a person because of his consistency. Like, I text everybody I knew, I love you, who fucked with Nips, because I was like, I know he's really for y'all. And it was mostly men. He's really for y'all. I was so thankful that existed for y'all. Because there's so many men that I know that want achievement, that want development, that want for themselves, that want mental freedom, that want ease. And he was showing that, like, you can have it and still be exactly who you are. Like, you don't have to change nothing about you. Like, you come from here, that's fine, but you can still maintain freedom and have freedom
Your
for yourself.
circumstances don't define.
Don't define you at all. And I think a lot of men that I know live like that. Like, well, I can't.
Right.
I can't. Yes, you can, because obviously Nips could.
Right.
So I loved him for showing freedom in that way.
I think it was beautiful at the service that his brother talked about him building a computer from scratch.
Oh, I love that.
That's,
story.
I don't think I
That's
understand what
story.
genius level
No.
that is.
Yes, not only is it genius level, but because of, like you said, we see a rapper and we see one thing about a rapper. Never in a million years would anybody have thought Nipsey Hussle was sitting down at the age of whatever, buying pieces for a computer and building it, to
From
then put it back
everywhere.
in his community later and say, let me build a STEM program back from where I'm from. Never would have imagined that. And these are the things that after I heard of his passing, made me feel some type of way, made me even feel guilty for being that person that you're even speaking about, putting a face to, right, just rapper, this is who you are. And I don't want to make it seem like I judge every rapper to be this one thing, but when you work in the industry and you work with people and you see them passing, they all kind of start to feel the same. And I felt guilty for feeling that way after knowing how amazing of a man he was. So, like you said, I think the service was super important.
Yeah.
I think that triggered just hearing him building a computer from scratch. It triggered a lot in our community for our young boys, our older men who probably have all of these things stored up here, but because it's quote unquote not cool to do it, are now like, wait, Nip used to do that?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I could talk like this and look like that and still be cool to do this. And I think that was really, really important. I'm so happy they said that. Is that changed for a lot.
No, I was just gonna say, like the things you're talking about, and especially you, Saf, when you mentioned that everything is already set. I think he was really intentional in that, in the way that, like, so Idris Sandu is a young kid that he mentored, and like he designed the entire Marathon clothing store. And so when you go into the store, everything is technologically like insane. Like you can put your phone over it. Like if you look at the funeral program, there's that viral video. If you look at the funeral program, it'll start playing his video. He saw himself in every single kid or every single opportunity and decided to put a person there that knew the business. So like the Marathon agency, the one he has with Karen Civil, where he like gets to like put other people on, and brand management, she's gonna continue that. Idris is gonna keep being an innovator and is speaking everywhere and teaching other kids how to do it. The Marathon clothing store is run by his family. It's gonna continue. His music, we probably will get more albums. Like he's not gone, and I think that's the crazy part of all of it. Like the spirit of Nipsey is so indelible. Like that impact it's really
very evergreen.
It's incredible. So I think if we can learn, obviously there's too many layers of what we can learn from watching that funeral and his life, but it's just like when you put people on, put them on in the right, like people's strengths, put them on where they belong to be, where they need to be, and I think he did an incredible job of that. We'll see Marathon everywhere probably for the rest of our
years.
That's definitely
That's
true.
what legacy is called.
Yes.
Real legacy.
He was legacy before he even passed. Like, it's just the way he was just lining up everything. And not to go into conspiracies, but I mean, Victory Lap being the title of his album, and just
But-
like,
I mean, like for me, like a long time. I mean, he's been screaming "Victory Lap" for like how long, man? So many years. And like, me and my friends, we didn't call Nip a rapper. We called him a motivational speaker. You know what I mean? He just put it out on the albums and verses and mixtapes. He like the hood Gary Vee. Just keep it real. You know what I'm saying? And like, you know, he championed us to do better and do more. You know what I'm saying? And like, but I think like the biggest challenge though within like for a lot of us like brothers out here is like capital. You know what I'm saying? Like getting the capital to be able to do it. And you know, honestly, as black men and actually black people, like we don't have the privilege of, you know, getting money in nefarious ways, you know, without being locked down for 20, 30 years, you know what I'm saying? Like, wow, you know, white guys, let's say white guys, white people, you know, they might be able to do some like insider trading things.
Ask they uncle.
Slapped on the wrist, they back out, they back at it, you know what I'm saying? Nah, we don't. We don't get that privilege. So like, you know, Nip got it from the mud, you know what I'm saying? He started it, but he stayed on task, man. And, you know, the messaging, he does live forever. The messaging that he puts out in his music, like I was listening to Mailbox Money before I got here, and it's like, yo, he gave us the whole game. Like, he gave us the whole plan. Like, he's telling you what to do. And like, literally step by step. And like, you know, it's amazing. He is still here with us. Yeah. That's how
Part of his message, you know, really, part of his message really was about contrasting the messages that we continually get. Right, because we're always told if you're gonna open a business, don't do it in your hood, right? Go to another neighborhood and do it. But strangely enough,
all the people that own businesses in your hood, they come to your neighborhood to open their businesses. But we're advised to leave our neighborhoods and don't open up here. And I think that's kind of why Nip kind of, for me, wasn't underground, but you got a decade in before you won a Grammy nod or anything like that, right? That kind of speaks to, you know, that whole marathon concept, because he was unwavering. You know, he wasn't really deviating from what he knew was true. Right. And I think that when you stay true, sometimes it take a little longer. Yeah. You know what I mean? But Nip was, to me, just like, I'm inspired to do more in my city and my neighborhood, you know, and I'm sure so many people are around the world. But it was just so unwavering, you know. He didn't deviate.
One of the reasons why I even, wanted you to come is because you're amazing at all these other things that you do, but you literally went back into your city. You speak to these kids all the time, and you even ran for city council. Like, that is true. You're literally Orange, New Jersey's Nipsey. Like, and that's why. No, seriously. If I'm gonna call it what it is, that's exactly what you're doing. You're coming back into your city. All of the teachings that you have, you're literally bringing it into these classrooms, to these kids, to these adults that are lost, that are seeking help, and you're doing that. And that's why I thought it was so important to have someone here with us that can speak to all of the experiences that you've been through, the passing, the murder of your best friend, your relationship with your parents. You could have been anything, and you chose to be this. And I think that's beautiful, and that I really wanted that to be seen, that you can talk like how you're talking, you can look like how you look, you can look like Nipsey, you could dress with a tailored jacket and still be you and still provide. And I thought it was really important to have you there for that, and I wanted to make sure I shine light on that.
Thank you so much.
That's really awesome.
One more thing. It might be a bit of a pivot, but I know we're talking about teaching and showing in the next generation and touching and being examples. And I know you are raising a daughter. You're raising a daughter as well, Ebro.
It's phenomenal. She has a lot of strong women around her, you know, and then, you know, for me, it's just about being somebody that she can feel comfortable talking to, and that if she asks me questions, I'm there for her, and we show emotion and express love, and she has that expectation that men can also be emotional and, you know, share their feelings. And, you know, it's about, you know, for me, it's about consistency over an extended period of time. It's about communication, it's about love, it's about, you know, and then also showing her about work, right? And showing her what it takes to actually complete tasks and, you know, put plans together and be a person of your word. And I mean, she's not even 5 years old, and we have conversations about her keeping her word, you know, or, you know, being on time and what time means, and planning, you know. Since she was really young, you know, her mom and I would communicate to her what we were gonna do for the day. So she understood, like, I gotta do this, mom has to do that, here's what you need to do, right? We have conversations about her contribution to her community, which her community is just the house, right? But it's still,
it's important.
I gotta do something, your mom gotta do something, you got stuff you gotta do too. Or when we take the trash out, you know, the reason it's organized in here is because we're all saying this is the recycling so that we can do this and do that, and everybody's saying they're gonna flatten the boxes and put the boxes, that's the rules, and we're gonna fight, you know, just, but though you plant those seeds, they don't know yet. Mm-hmm. But she, even at not even 5 years old, will bring up conversations that we had 2 years ago. Wow. Right, and say, I remember when, ain't I supposed to, and didn't this happen? I remember you said, what did, you know, and you just have to be there, and you have to, you know, be available and communicate as much as possible and be reliable and be consistent. That's what they need, you know, and that's, I think, boys and girls, mm-hmm. you know, because I think that's the other thing is, you know, as we're having this conversation and we're talking about emotional maturity and these, you know, boys also need those same things. Mm-hmm. They need to be hugged. Mm-hmm. They need to be told that they're loved from men and women. right? Held accountable, right? You said you were gonna do this, right? You didn't do that. Why? This is what the expectations are, right? Or you're saying they did something to you, but you made a choice to respond. Why did you make that choice to respond? And why did you respond in that way, right? Because you still have that choice in that moment to, digest what you're feeling and what decision you are about to make. And you don't want to regret that decision, right? And planting those seeds as soon as possible. They may not understand it when you plant it, but I'm a strong believer that you don't treat your children like they're not smart. You're doing them a disservice. You're doing them a disservice to not have expectations that they can hear your words, and while they don't understand them today, they're in there.
Yeah.
And you want to plant that seed so it could grow. So that's, I think fortunately for me, I've worked with a lot of young people, in my 30 years in media, at different levels, whether it's at a school level or just in the workplace. And even worked with adults that have never had real jobs before, right? Where you're helping adults who have only DJ'd clubs since they was 17 years old, and they have to navigate finances, and they have to navigate working in a corporate environment and dealing with becoming a parent and how to, be on the air and also be private and manage relationships. And so, fortunately, I've had some of that training before I even became a parent, of having to be a parent to adults too, which is a whole other layer that and you probably know this from having a kid, you will see in children that are not even 5 years old behavior that adults still have that went unchecked. Right. And you'll go, wow. Oh man, somebody didn't handle that when they should have. And now that person's 35 and still not able to deal with this.
I don't think I've ever heard it said like that before. That just hit different for me.
That's the conversation around generational trauma that passes itself off as culture, right? This is just the way we do it.
Yeah.
But essentially,
Say that one more. Say that again.
It's a lot to do with really kind of doing that work on I have an 8-year-old daughter. I wanted to bring her here so bad.
I was starting to bring my daughter, but I thought the conversations would be too. But the conversation's too heavy, death and gang and all that.
Next time.
Yeah, but
Got some gems.
She might have got it.
I think Ebro hit everything on the head though, so I don't really want to get into it much. But I definitely realize that right now we're amongst, with a lot of the work that you women are doing, we're amongst a cultural revolution where I don't think we have the space to allow that anymore, right? The boys will be boys mentality has wiped itself away because black women are now holding men, black men especially, accountable in ways that we've never been checked before. And I think, I'm happy to know that the next generation, because of the work that y'all are doing, I think we're better off. I think
But on that, hold your sons accountable too.
Exactly.
Because didn't we have that conversation?
Yes, we did.
Talking about, what was the saying, Rebecca? It was mothers raise their daughters and love their sons or something like that.
Yeah.
Because we out here with the whole women are holding men accountable, but those men were someone's son. Right. And the reason they're behaving that way is because the women in their life did not hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, I think that's very important. It's very important.
Yes. I just want to thank all of you individually, BGP and guests alike. Thank you so much for participating in this conversation. We hope that what was dropped today, the gems, the conversation really does echo out into our audience and audiences beyond that.